Hi guys, welcome back to Binge Watch Britney. So in today's episode, we are going to be covering the show on Netflix called Paranoid. So let's go ahead and get into it. So I'm going to be doing this episode a little bit differently. In the past, with some of the shows that I was talking about, I was doing a really deep, intensive dive into everything that was happening in like a full season, and it was a lot. And so I'm going to try and do a different format to hopefully reduce these episodes so that I can get them out kind of more efficiently and more quickly, and the content is also enjoyable. So, with all of that being said, let's go ahead and talk about Paranoid. So I've been on a kick recently where I've been watching a lot of international thrillers, crime type of TV shows, and I don't know why I'm doing that right now exactly, but I've been really fascinated with that. I actually watched a really good show called Chestnut Man, which I will be doing an episode on, and so I think that was kind of like one of the shows that got me continuing to watch these detective and investigative type of shows, and so Paranoid definitely fits the criteria for that, and so I definitely wanted to come on and do an episode about it, and so what we're going to be doing is the top 5 plot points that I think are important in this entire season 1 of Paranoid, and then I'll just also talk about some other things that happened to kind of like fill in the gaps of what actually happened during this season. So, plot point number 1. So, we have Angela murdered in the park, and we also find out that her ex Ruben is also murdered within the same week. And so, we have Angela, who's a doctor, and she's stabbed in the park where there's a bunch of kids playing with their parents and stuff like that. And then we have Ruben, who's found in his pool face down. I think they said that he was drugged and basically killed himself because he wasn't aware of what he was doing because he was basically out of his mind from the drugs and stuff like that. And so we do have a woman named Lucy who sees what's happening. She quickly grabs the child, pulls him away, and then we also learn that Lucy is a Quaker. She's very quirky. She says, not necessarily, she does say weird things, but she has like good intentions behind what she's saying, and she's kind of like talking in code in a way and trying to get people to see the bigger picture and kind of like just look deeper at what's going on. And so obviously, they think all of the people who are investigating. So we have Nina, Alec, and Bobby, and then their boss, Niles. And they all kind of think that she's a little weird, whatever, but they also are heavily relying on her because she is the only real eyewitness who saw what happened, grabbed the child, and then just the way that she communicates. So she's actually a very good person for them to have as a witness, and she's also connected to a lot of other things that are happening throughout the season. And then we also see that this is where Lucy gets involved with Bobby, and we know that Bobby is struggling with anxiety, and Lucy is kind of like this health nut. She's very into like wellness and holistic wellness and mental health and stuff like that. And so we do learn that she has a past that has shaped her to be this way. And so she's really the perfect person to help Bobby and help him get his anxiety under control in a way that doesn't cause him to rely on pills from the pharmaceutical industry and stuff like that. And so we do see that they get together and kind of like work through the different issues that they have. And one thing I want to point out with Bobby is that he really annoyed me during this season because there were a lot of times where he just made really bad decisions that impacted that could have negatively impacted the investigation that they were doing. And just one of these funny moments of where he really wasn't thinking well is when, actually 2 moments. One, when he was following Wayne Grow on the bus and he just got really faked out, and Wayne Grow was able to trick him into staying on the bus while he himself actually got off, and then he kind of like taunted him at the hotel, and then you see Bobby getting really frustrated at another point, and he ends up going to Wayne Grow's office, and there's this Jesus statue that's completely made up of pills, and he instantly said that he hated it when he saw it, and so he has this moment where he pushes the statue over and all the pills come out, the thing breaks, and so he looks like this person who's having a mental health break, and he's been pushed into that by Wayne Grow because they are aware of his anxiety issues. And so I just really wanted to highlight that even though his mental health issues are separate, he did have a lot of moments where he just wasn't thinking rationally, and he did a lot to kind of stall or delay the investigation, but he did continue to actually do his job and perform despite all of the stuff that he was dealing with. And then, kind of going back to Angela's murder, we have Jacob Apley, who is the prime suspect. People in the area know that he has a mental health issue, and so they are kind of quick to point to him as the person who is responsible for this murder. And then, obviously, it's their job to kind of figure out why this happened. And so, what we learn is that Alex had a connection to Jacob's doctor because that doctor, Dr. Crowley, also dated Alex's mom in the past. And so, Alex has this moment where he has to go and question Dr. Crowley, and they kind of reveal that they know each other, and we have Alex acting awkwardly, and so we know that something is quite not right with this dynamic between the two men. And then we also have the boss Niles, the lead detective. He's kind of really annoying because he's really focused on Jacob Apley being the person who committed the murder, and he's not really willing to consider other theories or other explanations as far as what happened, unless the other detectives, Nina, Bobby, and Alex, have actual proof to show that it wasn't Jacob Apley, because they have hunches or they have like bits and pieces, but because they don't have the full picture, their boss is like, no, this is on Jacob Apley. Announcing it to the public that we have our person, blah blah blah, and so he has to backtrack once they actually are able to get all of their ducks in a row and present like a theory that is rooted in evidence to him to get him to consider other people for this crime. The second major plot point is we have the ghost detective giving them clues. So we see Bobby has sent something first, and then I think we have Alex getting something as well after he has a confrontation with the actual person who committed the murder, which they refer to as the German. And so we have the ghost detective helping these detectives out. He is giving them clues, telling them to look into Angela's past. This is how they find out about Angela's ex being murdered, and so they're working with the police in Germany to figure out what's going on, and they're working with someone called Linda, and she's really good to have on their side as well, and we see that she actually had a deeper connection to this case as well. And so anyway, the ghost detective is telling them, hey, look into Angela's past. Someone was sneaking out of the house. I have this recording, and he also sends Bobby a recording of him watching Bobby, I think. And so he's just letting him know that, hey, people have eyes on you, you're not really aware of everything that's happening around you, and things like that. And so he also reveals that papers were stolen from Angela's house, and so we know that Angela was writing about something. She wasn't using a computer to do this, she was using a typewriter. And then we also know from Angela's father that the gas cooker or something like that exploded in the house. Luckily, she wasn't in the house, but this was something scary that happened. And then maybe a few weeks to a few months later, Angela herself was murdered. And so they're able to put all of this together and realize that Angela was actually being targeted, and they're trying to figure out why she was being targeted. And they think that it has something to do with the papers that she was writing. And so the ghost detective actually has taken like two of these papers. The German ends up getting, I guess, like a bigger stack of the papers, and he burns them when Bobby's chasing him. But the papers are the clue to everything that was going on. And then with the ghost detective, we do have him kind of like telling them who the bad guy is. And so Bobby and Alex, I can't remember how exactly, but they're able to find out where the German is staying, and he's staying like on this boat on the river, whatever. And so they're able to follow him somewhere, and Alex ends up confronting him, and he gets thrown into the water. He gets thrown from like, I don't know, 20, 30 feet up or something like that. So it is a really bad fall, and but the fact that he was in that situation was pretty bad, and so Bobby felt guilty about that. And what I found interesting was that in that moment you see Bobby like running away from the German, the person who's attacking them. Normally I feel like in America, especially because cops have guns and stuff like that, they would have just been shooting back at the German or whatever. And so I just find it really interesting that you have police in other countries where they don't have guns, and so they have to defend themselves in other ways. And so I don't know really which is better necessarily. I just know that it's done differently in other countries. The third major plot point is that Nina finds out that she's pregnant while dating Alex. So one thing I want to mention about Nina really quickly, and Alex as well. So I knew that I knew Nina from somewhere, and I ended up googling her, and I realized that she was someone from Game of Thrones. So she was part of the Sand family in Game of Thrones, and I recognized her right away, and I just didn't know where I knew her from. And then I had that same experience with Alex. I saw him in Fool Me Once, and so just a nice overlap to see characters that I've seen in other TV shows and movies, and so I just wanted to quickly call that out. And so anyway, we have Nina finding out that she's pregnant, and prior to this, she was actually dumped by her ex, and he was really adamant that the relationship was over, and she was really hysterical, and she really did not want to break up their relationship. She is older. She is 38 years old. He doesn't have any children yet, and so she was really counting on this relationship to kind of give her that future that she wanted. And so she's really thrown off by being dumped, and she's really begging him to get back together, to go to mediation, try to work it out, and he's just not really willing to listen. And so she ends up kind of like throwing her stuff at Alex, and Alex is actually into her, and so they start to hook up, they start to date, and I actually think that they are the perfect match for each other because one, they're partners, and so they really work close together, but they also get each other's humor and stuff like that. And so you can see moments throughout the season where Alex is like kind of like smiling at her and kind of like laughing at her jokes and stuff like that. So you see that he actually really does like her. And so we have this moment where they're kind of first getting together, and Alex's mom, her name is Monica Wayfield. She is basically a compulsive liar, and she finds out that they're kind of like hooking up, and so she tries to break them up, and she even goes to the police station to talk to Nina, and she's basically telling her that Alex has problems and that she's just kind of going to make things worse for him. And then what happened is Alex told Nina about how his mom was, and so Nina, when his mom is telling her that stuff, she kind of challenges her on the spot and says, "Oh, okay, I'll just call Alex and ask him." And so obviously Monica has to come up with like an excuse or a lie to prevent her from calling him and kind of like outing him. And so I thought that that was really just interesting because we have like Alex and Nina starting this like what should be a good relationship, and then you just have their mom kind of ruining it because she has her different hangups about like what she wanted for Alex as far as like his career, because she talked about wanting him to be a lawyer, and Nina made the crack, well, you know, he is in law because he's a cop and whatever. And so they are initially butting heads. We'll kind of see how that plays out. One thing that I was really confused by is Monica, Alex's mom. She wore kind of like red lipstick, and I didn't understand why they kept referring to her as having big lipstick. I didn't know if that meant like big as in bold or what exactly big lipstick meant, but that stuck out to me, so I just wanted to call that out. And then towards the end of the season, you know, we have Nina, as I said, realizing that she's pregnant, and so she immediately assumes that the baby is her ex's kid. I think it's Dennis, and so she's like, she goes to Alex and says, "Hey, you know, I'm pregnant. I think it's Dennis, and you know, I want to try to work it out with him for the baby, blah blah blah." And so she's just kind of throwing Alex away. And I really did not like that because Alex is obviously much better for her than Dennis, and so we see that he kind of backs off a little bit. We see her working things out with Dennis, and then they come to this moment where he basically, I guess, proposes to her on a park bench, and she talks about how she's very, very, very excited about having the baby, and she talks about how once the baby's born, she wants to basically be a stay-at-home mom. And so Dennis is like, "Oh no, you can't do that. We can't live on just my salary. You have to go back to work." And I'm really glad that she kind of stuck to what she wanted, which is to be a stay at home mom. And it was very important for her to have someone who would be supportive of that. And so we have this moment where, after basically a few episodes of her begging to get back with him, and then they get back together, she's having this moment where she realizes that this is not what she wants. She can do better. And so she kind of breaks things off with him. And so I was really glad to see that happen because there was no absolute reason for her to be with him just to raise the kid together and give the kid a stable two-parent home when he was never really supportive of who she was as a person, and then he definitely wasn't supportive of what she wanted from her motherhood journey, because as I said, she was really, really excited to have this child, and I feel like he just couldn't really give her the life that she wanted. as a result of all of this happening. So, towards the end of everything happening, we do have Nina and Alex having this conversation, and Alex is basically like, hey, let's give this a year. Let's really try to work on this relationship. I know you are having another man's baby, but I still want you. I still want to be with you. Let's give this a try. And so they end up giving it a try, and I was really happy about that because I really hated the way that Nina was like, oh, this is Dennis's child. I need to get back together with him, because I feel like she didn't really actually know if it was Dennis's child. I really hope that it's actually Alex's baby that she's having, because they would make such an awesome couple, and I would actually really want to see season two. I don't know if they're going to make a season two, but I would love to see more of their storyline and their relationship, because I really just love this show. And moving on to the fourth point, so we have Dr. Crowley being outed as taking advantage of women. So Dr. Crowley is a psychologist or a therapist. I'm not really sure what his exact title is, but he basically is able to talk to people about their mental health and then prescribe them medication. And so we find out that he actually has history with Lucy. So Lucy is the Quaker that we mentioned at the beginning, and we know that she has some type of troublesome past that he's aware of, and he is really the type of person who is gaslighting everybody. Like, they could be having a conversation about something, and Lucy is talking to him about like the truth and about one thing, but he's responding to her in a way that's trying to make her think that she's crazy, and he does this to everyone, and it's super, super annoying. And so I'm glad that Lucy challenged him and stood up to him and said, hey, I'm not gonna let you do this to me, and I'm not gonna fall for those tricks and the schemes that you're running and trying to convince me that I'm crazy and make me think that I'm crazy, because I'm not. And so we have Dr. Crowley. He is very close to the investigation because he was Jacob's doctor. And so we have this moment where he goes to Lucy and she's confused about why he's there. He says that he wants to check in on her, and then he basically is blackmailing her with these bad pictures of her in compromising positions with other men, and he uses that to blackmail her into finding out information about the investigation and then obviously giving him that information. So Lucy does the right thing. She breaks things off with Bobby, and she tells him this while he is basically in Germany trying to investigate things from that end with Detective Linda in regards to Ruben and everything going on with him. And so she tells him that over the phone, but then she does the right thing and she goes to Nina and Alex and she tells them what Dr. Crowley said to her and everything that she knows. So she's being very transparent and very helpful to them and helping them kind of like work their way towards resolving everything that's going on as far as the murder and why this happened and all of this stuff. And so I was really proud that she did that, that she stood in the face of this scheming a-hole who was trying to take advantage of everyone. And so obviously we know that Dr. Crowley does this with basically all of his patients. He is not helping them, he is manipulating them, gaslighting them, and then he's kind of putting them in these positions to where he can take advantage of them when it is convenient for him. And so we have this moment where Alex is really upset with his mom, and he's very vocal with her about getting back together with Dr. Crowley. He even tells Dr. Crowley himself to stay away from his mom, and Dr. Crowley is basically ignoring that and just doing whatever he wants. And so we have Alex's mom going to Lucy, and she's basically trying to get information. She realizes that Lucy came before her, something happened, and so she just kind of wants to know more about that experience to validate her own experience with Dr. Crowley. And so what she reveals is that she got into a fight with Dr. Crowley, and basically she knows or is aware of him sneaking out at like 4 a.m. to talk on another phone. So she was with him, a phone rang, he grabbed the wrong phone, and then she realized that he had two, and so she realized that he was having a secret conversation with someone. She thought he was cheating, but she didn't know. But this information was very helpful because it help them connect the dots so that they could figure out everything that was happening. So she ends up having a conversation with Dr. Crowley, and she records him, and then she gives this taped recording to her son to listen to, and this is another way of them being able to kind of connect the dots. And I was very interested in that because I know at some cities, some states, you can't record people without their permission. I don't know how that works as far as the cops using that as evidence to kind of like make their case or whatever. And so I was just really intrigued by that, but I thought it was interesting that they were just able to basically take evidence from like regular people, lay people, and kind of build their investigation off of that. And so what happens is we have Henry, Jacob's brother. He's having trouble dealing with the loss of his brother. He talked about like how he felt really responsible for his brother and how this was stressful. But then he also talks about missing his brother and just kind of dealing with that grief. And so he ends up going to Dr. Crowley for help, for medication. And Dr. Crowley is basically manipulating him, gaslighting him to prescribe him medication. And so when Henry goes home to his wife and talks to her about all of this, she doesn't want him taking the medication. So he ends up going back to Dr. Crowley's house and he sees him being arrested. And so when Dr. Crowley is freed, Henry ends up going to him again and kind of like having a conversation about everything that happened. And Dr. Crowley is able to convince him that he's being wrongly targeted by the police for harassing him, all of this stuff. And so Henry now has an issue with the police. He thinks that they're doing the wrong thing and all of this stuff. He won't help them, but he starts to get suspicious and he ends up kidnapping Dr. Crowley. He takes him to this old abandoned former hospital, whatever. He basically is able to get a taped confession from Dr. Crowley. He's asking him questions. He's shoving pills down his throat the way that he was prescribing pills left and right to other people and kind of like getting them hooked on drugs and all of this stuff. And so he's able to get a confession. But what happens is two things happen. We have Bobby talking to Lucy and he's talking about his anxiety. He's also trying to help with the case and figure out where Henry is, because at this point they realize that Dr. Crowley is missing. They know that somebody probably took him. They don't know who. And so Bobby is trying to figure out, who is the person who took Dr. Crowley, where are they? And so he's talking to Lucy and they talk about something called care of community. And so Bobby is able to correctly figure out where Henry and Dr. Crowley are, but then at the same time, we have Henry. He made a phone call from Dr. Crowley's secret phone to the other number, and that number was Waingro, and so Waingro was able to contact the hired killer, tell him to track Dr. Crowley's phone, and so now we have both Bobby and the hired killer going to the care of community hospital, whatever that is. And there's a confrontation that happens there. So we see that after Henry gets the confession, Dr. Crowley is free to leave. He gets shot by the hired killer. I think Henry gets shot as well, but he has hidden the tape, and so the killer can't find it. Bobby interrupts the killer, and so the killer starts chasing after him. And then we have this moment where we see Bobby kind of like, running away, hiding, and then he makes it up the stairs. The killer follows him, and he's able to basically throw this filing cabinet on him, and he falls down the stairs, and he's basically crushed to death or whatever, or at least in really critical condition. And so that wraps up that situation. This leads me to number 5, the last major plot point, which is that drug trials are at the heart of everything. So we had Ruben, who had a kid with another woman who also works for Rustin Wade. Rustin Wade is the company that Waingro works for. Angela also has some connection to this company through Ruben. And then we also have Dr. Crowley connected to Rustin Wade through Waingro. We also have Linda connected to Rustin Wade because she had investigated a bus crash and she basically wasn't able to come to the conclusions that she's coming to now, and so everything is really connected to the fact that there are drug trials at Rustin Wade. We have the detectives investigating all of this to figure out what's happening, and we know that in order to kind of like expose the drug trials, they need the paperwork to say who was involved in the trials. They need those people to speak up and say what they experienced, what they witnessed, that sort of thing. Nina is able to find someone who is currently teaching swim classes, so she left her job as a nurse, and because she felt so much guilt about what she did, she's teaching swimming lessons, and so her and Nina end up talking after a brief chase, and she reveals that the bus driver who killed the kids by driving off the cliff, he had been part of the drug trials, and so the medication obviously had a negative effect on him. And so all of this is all connected. We have Waingro, who is basically running the company, and he sees himself as the cleanup guy, so he's kind of aware of everything that's happening. But if there's anything that goes wrong, he's the person who's supposed to fix it and make it better. And so that is what he's, I guess, tells everyone to lessen his role and everything. And so we do see at the end where he is basically caught, he's trapped, and he leaves his office, he goes home to kind of like give his daughter a heads up. The cops come and arrest him, and then that's kind of like how they wrap it up. And so all of this, Angela's death, Ruben's death, Jacob's death, and I think I can't recall if anybody else died, but all of this was happening because Ruston Wade, the company, wanted to cover up that their drugs were harming people, that they were making a lot of money off of the drugs that they were prescribing to people. And the detectives were able to wrap all of this up and end a really great season. So to wrap up this episode, I really enjoyed watching Paranoid. I don't know if I could envision anybody else in these roles. I'm not sure how popular the show is, but again, I really enjoyed it. It was more lighthearted. It wasn't exactly like a comedy or anything like that, but it wasn't as intense as something like Chestnut Man, and so I thought that it did a good job of like covering like an intense topic such as a murder and dealing with mental health issues, and then also kind of like everything with the pharmaceutical industry and things like that. I thought that they did a good job of covering all of that in kind of like a lighter way while still having a show that kind of properly moved the storyline along and also kept you engaged and kind of like wanting to know what happened, because I have watched other shows where they've had like a similar storyline, but it just wasn't enough to keep me engaged and keep me wanting to watch. And so, just like the chemistry that the characters had with each other or the actors had with each other, it just made the show more enjoyable for me to watch. I don't know if this show is for everyone, but I really, really did enjoy watching it, and I hope that this podcast episode has been helpful in kind of like recapping everything that happened in season one. So if you haven't watched it yet and you're just listening to this podcast, I hope that you go and check out the first season. It really is worth the watch. And again, I thank you guys for listening to this episode, and I'll see you in the next one.